competitively priced at 69.99 US dollar, practically 70 US dollar. You can get this DTC480 from DUNU directly, and what you're gonna get is this box here. Inside this box, you're gonna find the dongle itself, accompanied with this nice looking USB Type-C cable, which seems to be very well built, the kind of quality that you can expect from DUNU. And looking physically at the dongle itself, let's just take a moment to appreciate the build. It is definitely looking like, futuristic kind of thing, more like, even reminded me of Tesla kind of design. And at the side here, you're gonna see these two buttons, pretty much very simple affair of independent volume adjustment, which I believe is a 100-step independent volume adjustment. And on the other side, you're gonna see a LED indicator. And let's just get this thing connected. Like that. Seems to be very solid. Okay. Inside, what you're gonna find is a dual configuration of Cirrus Logic CS43198, and it comes with a resolution of 384 kHz, supporting up to DSD256. As for the power itself, I would say that this DTC480 is kind of a bit moderate, rated at just 150 milliwatt of power at 32 ohm and 65 milliwatt of power at 32 ohm from the 3.5 mm single-ended. And the signal to noise ratio, anywhere from 130 dB from the 4.4 mm balance and as low as 125 dB of signal to noise ratio, which means that this thing is very, very silent. With a rating at just 150 milliwatt of power per channel at 32 ohm from the 4.4 mm balance and also 3.5 mm single-ended at 65 milliwatt of power per channel, you might be wondering, is this powerful enough to drive headphones? Because if I were to quickly compare with very competitive dongle in the market nowadays, very powerful ones like this Onyx Alpha, which offer 500 milliwatt of power from the 4.4 mm balance, and this iBusso DC07 Pro, which offer 430 milliwatt of power per channel at 32 ohm from the 4.4 mm balance, then looking at the specification alone, you would say that this DTC480 does not seem powerful at all. But hold on, let me just share you something. Using my Sennheiser HD 600 here, which is rated at 300 ohm, and also my favorite magnetic planar here, which is Hi-Fi-Man Sundara. And let me just share you this. I am surprised. Surprised because despite the low rating, especially when driven using this 4.4 mm balance, I was hearing the kind of sound which I would consider as usable, wholesome in fact, and the kind of volume which I need in order to drive this at around just 44 out of 100. That is impressive, correct? Because if I were to compare quickly with this iBusso DC07 Pro, then I need 54 out of 100 on this DC07 Pro, and this one only need 44. So 10 step different there. That's kind of a bit weird, right? Okay, but then again, there must be some differences. I would just say this. While DTC480 was able to emit the kind of loudness needed for this Sennheiser HD 600 here, it does, impart the kind of, let's say, differences, when I compare directly with these two here, because that extra milliwatt of power offered by these two would mean that they perform closer to desktop kind of experience, while this still feels like as if I'm running from a dongle. So just remember that. But for as long as you are not comparing directly, this is definitely more than enough to drive this to proper listening loudness. And then let's talk about the efficiency of this DTC480. And I already mentioned it has power, but how efficient it is. This is one of the dongle that you would want if battery endurance to your phone is important to you. Attached to my Xiaomi Mi 90 here, which is running on 4000 mAh of battery, USB exclusive mode, driving from this 4.4 mm balance, from this IEM here, which is a DUNU Titan S2, I was able to score an impressive 15 hours of runtime before it ran out of battery on this phone here, which is super impressive because these two, at the max, DC07 Pro would only be able to score 13 hours maximum with the same configuration. and Onyx Alpha even less at just at around 10 hours. So very impressive. And another impressive thing is that this thing runs cooler despite being continuously used to drive different type of headphones and IEMs. DTC480 offers the kind of sound which I consider as being natural, neutral, organic, and definitely analog. So you can expect the kind of dynamic presentation which is smooth and mature sounding. But then again, it depends also on what type of partners you are attaching it to. So we are talking about synergy factor here. So I have been testing this DTC480 with so many different type of partners, okay? Especially with this DUNU Titan S2, a single dynamic driver from DUNU, which I really love, okay? And also this Hidis MP145 here, and also my reference here, which is Etimotic ER2XR, and of course, last but not least, my Sivga Nightingale here, my favorite magnetic planar, the one that I use the most on regular basis. And of course, I have already shown you this Sennheiser HD600 here, and this Headphone Sundara, and also not forgetting this one, Aoni AR5000. So let's just talk about synergy factor. The thing is that, okay, this is relatively something which you can consider as being warm sounding because of that analog element. But then again, being warm does not mean that it is colored. The good thing about it is that it is definitely linear with the way it presents all the dynamic range of between treble, mid-range, all the way to the lower frequency. Now, let's just talk about how does it sound like when attached to this Titan S2, which is relatively something which I would consider as near to being neutral and perhaps can be considered as slightly on the brighter side if were to be compared with some other competition in the market. Then I am getting the kind of synergy which is just simply beautiful. That's how I would describe it. And not a surprise because I think DUNU has kind of like, tuned this DTC480 to suit many of their house sound, which also include DUNU Falcon Ultra. So it is definitely a good pair between these two. But then again, when I switch to something which is a bit warmer sounding, something like this Sivga Nightingale, so I am hearing the kind of sound which resulted in something which is velvety smooth, very musical, a little bit analytical, okay? But overall, I would say that the combination sounded like very warm. Something like, as if I'm running on this Onyx Alpha on slow filter and even warmer still. And when I switch back to something which is relatively brighter, more neutral, let's say this Etimotic ER2XR here, and through indeed, now I am hearing the kind of balance which I would consider as fairly well tuned between being analytical and musical. So I'm getting quite a lot of dynamic extension, macro detail, micro detail, and even the same result achieved when I attach this DTC480 to this Hidis MP145. So it depends on what type of partner you attach it to, and pretty much similar to many other very well-tuned Cirrus Logic CS43198 especially, you can expect this DTC480 to offer the kind of sound which I consider as being wide and open sounding, especially when attached to this Hidis MP145, and even my Sennheiser HD600 sounded wide and open to my ears. Timbre signature or sound signature. If you are looking for warm sounding dongle which is analog and very organic sounding, definitely you would want to have DTC480. As you can see here, compare against some of the competition in the market, most of the time the one that separates between one to another dongle is how they present the sound timbre itself. This is definitely easily ranked among some of the most analog sounding dongle in the market nowadays, alongside something like iBasso DC07 Pro, EPZ TP50, Onyx Alpha, and even Centrance Depot HD. Compared and rated against the rest of the competition, how does this DTC480 fares against a very fiercely contested dongle market, even from the Cirrus Logic side, which is CS43131 and lots of CS43198 as well. And let me just show you the ranking system for Dongle Madness. And let me remind you that what you're going to see is not all of them, because obviously I have tested in excess of 180 dongles throughout the last 3 years. I will not be able to show all of them, but for the sake of comparison, I'll try to squeeze as much as possible within the same one page. So looking at it, this DTC480 is very impressive, scoring a total score of 86 out of 100. And when we look at the four element of the sound itself in blue, it is a very well-rounded dongle, scoring 9 each on those individual segment. And it is also impressive with driving power. It is also good with volume management, and it is definitely very impressive when it comes to power efficiency. In comparison, I would just say that this DTC480 remind me a lot to another dongle which I have tested previously, which is Kiwi Ears Allegro, which is the same type of dongle which I would consider as being natural, analog, and organic sounding. And it is definitely the kind of analog sound which I can expect as well from EPZ TP50, from this Onyx Alpha, and even from this iBasso DC07 Pro, except that these two are definitely not the kind of dongle which I would consider as being warm sounding. And when it comes to technicalities, this is fairly good, rated at 9 as well overall, because I do feel that, due to that warm effect, the rendering of macro and micro detail, the imaging itself may appear kind of a bit subdued if we're to compare with the highest ranked performer in Dongle Madness. But all in all, I would say that this DTC480 is definitely the kind of dongle which you would want, especially if you are looking to use something which is relatively neutral sounding like this Aune AR5000, and definitely DUNU very own IEMs like this DUNU Titan S2 or even DUNU Falcon Ultra.